Okay, we were talking about the two blind guys that were healed, and they turned out and went and told everybody. We're still in Matthew chapter 9, verse 27. So, what I want to see before we move on from this passage is Jesus touched them. This is the two blind guys. He says, he touches their eyes and said, "According to your faith, will it be done to you?" Now, it's interesting because we can get mixed up on this stuff. According to your faith. Okay, so what Jesus is saying is, it's not in proportion to your faith. So much faith, so much healing. That's not what he's talking about here. You could translate this as, because you believed, your request is granted. Okay? So it's important because we can get that backwards.
Yes.
You don't have enough faith to be healed. No, that's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus said, because you believed, your request is granted. Because you believe that I could do what I said I could do. You see?
Yeah.
Okay, just a few points I wanted to share with you guys. Hopefully it'll help clear some of this stuff up. So I went back and I tallied up the miracles in the Old Testament, and about 56 miracles of which you can see. Now there may be a few more, a few less. That's my own calculation. So I didn't read that anywhere. So just take it with a grain of salt. But anyway, more or less about 56 miracles, and that's excluding the Genesis account where God creates stuff. So all these are going to come with Exodus. Most of the miracles you're going to see in Exodus, you're going to see in the Kings and the book of Samuel. So you got Moses, Elijah, and Elisha. Okay, there's a few others scattered around, Daniel and the lion's den, this sort of thing. But about 56 miracles in the entire Old Testament. And the Old Testament covers about, scholars will argue with you about this, but the Old Testament covers about 4,000 years. So 56 miracles in 4,000 years. Of those miracles, 3 have to do with individuals, about 3. Excluding Daniel's lion's den. Okay? We have 2 people raised from the dead. The widow's son, Elijah and Elisha, both raised widow's son. And then you have Nahum, or Naaman, I believe his name is. How do you spell it? Naama. He was a general that had leprosy that was sent to Elisha and told him to dip in the river 7 times and he was healed. Okay. The point of the story is you got 2 people raised from the dead, you got 1 guy cured of leprosy. Over 4,000 years in the Old Testament. Jesus steps on the scene, and we just saw this past class what just a little glimpse of Jesus' life looked like in one day. Jairus' daughter, the one with the issue of blood, the 2 guys are healed from the blind. You see this? You see what's going on here? And John tells us that you only get a glimpse of what Jesus has done. John tells you they only wrote just a portion, a tiny portion of the miracles of Christ in our scriptures. John says, in a bit of hyperbole, I'm sure, but not much, if everything Jesus did was written down, there would not be enough books in the world to contain them all.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of stuff we're seeing here. Now, why is that important? Additionally, you don't see anybody in the Old Testament, nobody's blind that's healed, nobody's deaf that speaks, there's nobody that's got demons cast out of them.
Yeah.
Remember, you got about the only one in the Old Testament we see was Saul. Remember Saul, the spirit came to him, evil spirit, and David would play his harp, and then the spirit would go away and then come back. That's really the only time in the Old Testament we see some sort of kind of demon possession. Jesus is here, he's casting out demons left and right. You see? Mm-hmm. Remember the job description of Messiah? He's going to be healing the blind, and the deaf are going to hear, the lame are going to leap. This has never been done in Israel before. And here these guys, these Pharisees and these other guys, they're not buying it. You can't not get this. If you have read your Old Testament, if you have a 5th grade understanding of it, this is your guy. You see, he's hitting it over and over and over and over again. And that's one of the reasons why he says, okay, when I raise the dead, or Jairus' daughter, or if I heal somebody that's blind or open their ears, that's right on point. That's straight out of the Old Testament what the Messiah is going to do. So, you can't not see that. And Jesus is not ready to go full on public with his claim to Messiahship at this time. It's going to interfere with his mission. Okay? All right. So, let's jump down to Matthew chapter 9, verse 35. And this is for need for workers. So at this time, Jesus is going through all the towns and villages and in and around Galilee. He's preaching the kingdom of God. He's healing all kinds of diseases. So he calls his 12 the closest disciples, his apostles, together, and he's going to heal them out, send them out. This is Matthew chapter 10, verse 1. So he calls his 12 to him and sent them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and heal every disease and sickness. So Jesus calls his 12 to him, calls them to him, and he sends them out. And when he does, he sends them out 2 by 2, I think for accountability and for encouragement. And also he gives them power. He gives them his power to heal people, to cast out demons, all this kind of stuff. So he gives them authority, his authority to do this. The apostles here are kind of getting I think there's 2 things going on here. One, the apostles are getting to kind of, I say wet their feet or dip their toe or start taking the training wheels off here while Jesus is still with them present. He's still physically present. So what they're going to be required to do when Jesus leaves, they get a practice trial run at when he's still around. That's got to be huge. And by the way, these guys have got to be freaking out about this. They've been walking around Jesus watching him do all this stuff and kind of standing back and watching. But here, they're going to have to start doing what Jesus was doing. That's got to be nerve-wracking. Anyway, and they're going to have extreme power, extreme authority. The more power and authority you have, the more responsibility that you'll be called to. So anyway, so he tells them, he lays out their mission, and he says, look, I'm going to send you guys out. And when I send you out, we're in Matthew chapter 10, verse 5. I'm going to send you out. When I send you out, I don't want you to go to the Gentiles. I want you to go to the lost sheep of Israel. And I want you to preach the kingdom of God. I want you to heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Okay? So you see the order of salvation here. Remember when we get to the epistles, Paul says salvation comes first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. Here, Jesus tells them specifically to go to the Jews. Stay away from the Gentiles. It's not that time yet. So he's sending them out to the lost sheep of Israel. And there's a couple reasons for that. That's the God's plan of salvation. First to the Jew, then to the Gentile. But the time is getting short for Jesus' public ministry, and time's also getting short for the house of Israel in general. Judgment's coming on Israel, and judgment will be brought on Israel in 70 AD when God drops the hammer on Israel. He takes away their cult, their religious system, and scatters the nation and does away with Judaism, the rituals and the forms of Judaism. So he sends them out. He says, travel light. Don't take an extra garment or anything like that. He says he was sending them out as sheep among the wolves. And it's interesting here, when you get to Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, Jesus sends them out with an initial warning. Initial charge to what to preach and what to do, where to go. And then when you get to Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, we see Jesus seems to be talking, giving instructions for a further time period. Not just the time period that he's sending them out here. Because he's going to talk about how you're going to be flogged by the synagogues, you're going to be handed over to the Gentiles of the rulers, and you're going to be persecuted by the religious establishment, you're going to be persecuted by the government. And then a little bit further down, it says you're even going to be hated and despised by your own family. 3 institutions, by the way, established by God that have, been corrupted. But none of these things that he's talking about right here actually takes place on this first journey that the apostles go on. So it seems like this is the kind of stuff that's going to happen after Christ dies, but before judgment comes. And one of the hardest passages, let's see, in the New Testament is this is Matthew chapter 10, verse 16 through 33. Halfway through it says, I tell you the truth, after he's given all these instructions and what's going to happen to them, their persecution, he says, I tell you the truth, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. And you wonder what that means. Because if he's talking about his second coming as we know his second coming, then that's not true. And that didn't happen. So he must be talking about something else. And what most commentators look at this passage and say, there's a lot of different views about it, but essentially the Son of Man, before the Son of Man comes, he's talking about coming in judgment. He specifically says Son of Man here, and we know that's the figure out of Daniel chapter 7, who is coming as judge. So God will bring judgment on Israel in 70 AD. And then the times of the Gentiles will be in full swing at that time. Okay. All right. Matthew chapter 10, verse 40. He says, this is Jesus says, he says, he who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives the one who sent me. So that's extremely important for us to understand, because that tells us that you cannot reject the apostles of Christ and still have Jesus. You can't love Jesus and hate Paul. You can't disregard his messengers. The Jews try to do this with, first century Jews try to do this with Jesus. Yeah, Jesus, you're a lunatic, we hate you, but we love the Father. You can't have it that way. Same way with the apostles. If you try to reject what the apostles wrote to us, you're rejecting the one who sent the apostles, and that's Christ here. And we get explicit instructions from him. He says, if you reject my apostles, you reject me. So we got to take it easy. When we go, we like to read our red letters in our Bibles, and that's good. Maybe you can know if Jesus is speaking or not. It's helpful in some ways. But just know that when you read the rest of the New Testament, what you're hearing is the Word of God, the Word of Christ. These are his apostles. And he just tells you here, if you accept my apostles, you accept me. If you deny my apostles, you deny me. So they're all the words of God. They're all the words of Christ. Okay? All right. And then we see, we're going to tie up some loose ends here. We're back in Mark chapter 6. If you want to go to Matthew, chapter 6, either one, Matthew or Mark. I'm sorry, not Matthew. Yeah, Mark chapter 6. Yeah, Matthew chapter 14. This is about Herod. This is Herod and John the Baptist. This is what happened to John the Baptist. So Herod hears that Jesus is doing all these miracles and things like that. And he thinks that Jesus is John the Baptist come back to life. And then we're told the story about what actually happened to what actually happened to John the Baptist. So Herod, remember this is a tetrarch up here, northern Galilee. So he's having a birthday party, and John the Baptist is in prison. Remember, he's in prison because Herod took his brother's wife, stole his brother's wife, and they're having a birthday party. Herod has a birthday party, and he's having this huge banquet, and he's got all his nobles and everybody there, and they're having a good old time. Well, his stepdaughter and great niece, I believe it is, Salome, comes and dances for Herod and all his guests. So pleases Herod real well, and he's drunk and he's running his mouth. And he says, he tells the girl, I will give you anything you want up to half my kingdom. This girl, commentators tell us, would have been between probably 12 and 14 at the time. So she runs out and asks her mom, what should I ask for? And the mom, obviously the little girl here is still young enough that she's, that's the first thing she does, to go ask her mom what she should ask for. Because, he's just been offered it. Now, what he's saying here is something that you would hear from, say, like a Roman emperor or something. Remember, Herod is not a king. He thinks he is. He's got some authority, but he's really a puppet. He doesn't have any real authority like Roman type authority. Anyway, so he's running off the mouth. This is something that a big shot ruler would say. This is what he says in front of his guest. Anyway, she comes back. The mom, Herodias, says, I want John the Baptist dead. I want his head. She hated John. When you think of Herodias and Herod here, you should immediately call to mind Jezebel and Ahab. Because Jezebel, like Herodias, there's nothing good about her at all. I'm not talking about just wicked through and through. She has the hardest heart you can possibly think of. All right. That's how Jezebel is. That's how Herodias is. And both of them were married to weak men. So she goes out. Herodias hates John the Baptist because he's been running her down and talking bad about Herod in public, saying that their marriage is illegal. You shouldn't even be married. She wants to kill him. She wants to kill John the Baptist, but Herod, he's scared of John. He knows John is a righteous man. He knows John is a prophet. So he just kind of locks him away, and hopefully that will be the end of it. So he's been locked away. Herodias can't get his hands on him yet. He's not willing to fold that far yet. But here's her opportunity. The girl dances. She comes out and asks her mom, what should I ask for? John the Baptist's head. She comes back in and tells Herod that, and Herod is greatly distressed, greatly disturbed by it. But he backed himself in the corner. And so instead of saying, that was a foolish thing that I said, ask for something and I'll give you a pile of gold or something. No, he doesn't want to lose face. Like one commentator I read said that, the last thing a weak man wants to do is to be seen weak by others. Yeah. So he goes through with it, and he knows he shouldn't have went through with it. So he has John the Baptist decapitated, and his disciples come in and bury the body. Herod is so ate up with conscience and guilt. When Jesus steps on the scene doing all these, remember John the Baptist, the Apostle John will tell us in his book, John the Baptist did no miracles. And that's another kind of side issue. Jesus said he's the greatest prophet to ever live. He did no miracles. So when we evaluate the greatness of somebody, we need to have the view of Scripture. It's not about these things, okay? But John did no miracles, but Jesus steps on the scene and he's doing miracles like a blaze. Nobody's ever seen this kind of stuff happen before. Every single day, Jesus is just this whole day is with miracles. He can't get away from these people. So Herod, he immediately thinks that John the Baptist has come back to life. He didn't do any miracles while he was alive the first time, but now it's obvious that's who it is because he's doing miracles left and right. That's the only way he can do it. So Herod is convinced that Jesus is John the Baptist reincarnated.